We are live.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the Joint City Council Planning and Zoning Commission Rollingwood Community Development Corporation work session. We are going to open up this meeting with a roll call for all of our council members present. I'm going to start with you guys as I have you on my screen. Amy Patillo.
Present.
Sarah Hudson.
Here.
Gavin Massagill. Here. And Wendy, I think you're joining us by phone, is that correct?
Yes, I'm here.
Wendy Hundley's here. Unfortunately, Buck Shapiro had, they have a family challenge that they're dealing with, so he won't join us this afternoon. Also joining us, and we have City Administrator Amber Lewis, Ashley Wayman, City Secretary. We have Carrie Kaler on the line, Head of Development Services. And we have both Sean and Kathy from Vegetation, as well as Jamil Allen and Amy Rodnick, I see, from Planning and Zoning, and Pat Sheehan from RCDC. If there's anybody else on the city side that has joined us only by phone, forgive me for not letting everybody know you're here, but please don't hesitate to let us know. I also understand that Jordan Scott has joined us by phone. Is that correct?
I'm on, if you can hear me.
Got you, buddy. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so now we have roll call and some meetings. What we're going to do, guys, for folks that have joined us in the audience, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. We are going to open this up for a presentation from Pegasus. We're going to allow Sean and Kathy and some of our city administration to jump in if necessary as they lead that presentation. We will, let's see, we do have public comments that are available. We'll do that after the presentation, after the regular agenda, and we'll open that up. And at that point, I'll ask that folks keep their comments to 3 minutes. I'll go back over this as we go get closer to the public comments section rather, but there is a hand icon at the bottom of your screen if you're joining us from a laptop. If you are joining us from a tablet or phone, with the video or the application, you'll find 3 little dots in your lower right-hand corner. There's a hand icon there. Press that. If it turns blue, that'll indicate on our side that you're interested in speaking. When you're called on, your microphone will be yellow. You click on that, or orange rather. You'll click on your orange microphone to turn it blue, and that will mean you're live and can start and can begin speaking. Again, we'll run back through that when we get to the public comment section. There's also a way to do it via phone if you're joining us by phone, and I'll let Ashley Wayman cover that when we get there. In the meantime, I'm going to call up item 2 of this regular agenda, update and discussion on the comprehensive planning process, including the public outreach results and preliminary fiscal impact analysis. The only thing I'm going to comment on before we get this, and I open it up to Sean at Pegasus, please everybody note that this is an update and discussion only. This is the first of what I anticipate to be several discussions, community discussions around this. This is not a decision-making instance. So council is not authorized to make any decisions one way or another coming out of this work session. With that, Sean, Kathy, thank you both for joining us. I'm going to open the floor to you guys for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd love all of you to please silence or mute your microphone as well, unless you have something as we're going through the presentation that you really don't understand. We have a lot of slides to show and illustrate and kind of get through. We're really excited about this. We shared some of this with your city staff last week. We wanted them to, kind of walk through, see if we're missing anything, and give us any feedback on a few things. And I would say jointly, we are super excited to share both the public input as well as the preliminary fiscal analysis that we've done. And just as the mayor said, I want you all to understand that this is what we're doing tonight, it's an education more than anything to the city council and everybody else who's listening about what the residents, largely residents, are really feeling about really important critical decisions related to future land use planning and other things that we'll talk about. And when you, as a council member, hear this information and then you look at the fiscal analysis that we're going to be talking about at the end, I really want you to try and put both of those together and then think critically and give us some feedback when we get to the end of this presentation, because we have already started writing the comprehensive plan, the early chapters, and we are set to actually provide a draft of that to you all about the first or second week in August, and we'll talk specifics about those dates. So your feedback tonight is pretty important for us. So I know you know this. For some of you who might be new to this, us, we are based here in Austin, Texas. We work all over the country doing similar kind of planning. We are experts in looking at land use and economics in the fiscal analysis of that. So this, it is your first, comprehensive plan. Obviously, part of our scope of work is to update the zoning map and your zoning ordinances, largely focused on Bee Cave Road, and then again examining the fiscal impacts of all of those decisions. We are about at the end of phase 2. And as I mentioned, we've already kind of started in on phase 3, where we're analyzing and putting things together. So we are going to be coming back to council and then planning commission in August and September are really the 2 big months for us to get feedback from both the planning commission and council, and then start moving that process of adoption forward. So I am going to turn this over to Kathy. And I would just say Kathy's done an amazing job synthesizing some pretty complex issues, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. Kathy, go ahead, and I'll be your Vanna.
Awesome, thank you. So first of all, I just wanted to start off with a couple of key takeaways. Obviously, there's a lot of information that we received from residents, but here is some interesting pieces of information, and I'll go in more detail as we move through. But great news, we received a 50% response rate based on the total estimated households in Rollingwood. Vast majority of respondents live in Rollingwood, 96%. We also had 8% of respondents work in Rollingwood, 4% own a business, and 2% also said they were elected officials. A large group of respondents have lived in Rollingwood for over 10 years, 57%. And Rollingwood is definitely a family community. 52% of households have 4 to 5 people within their household. And of course, 60% of respondents have children under 18, which I think speaks to the next point. What is it that residents love about living in Rollingwood? So the location, the excellent school district, and a feeling of safety were among what people love most about the community. When asked about the #1 issues facing Rollingwood today, drainage definitely came up many times. In addition to, there are some concerns about what is felt to be the overbuilding of residential properties, and I'll get into that further as we move along, and also increased traffic throughout the neighborhood. And beyond drainage, we did ask specific questions about what residents would like to see on the BK commercial corridor, and many stated that they would like to see more commercial options in addition to sidewalks in key areas and generally just improved walkability within the community. A couple more points. So we asked what could be done to further bring the community together and strengthen that community connection. And the overwhelming response was community events, obviously post-COVID. A majority of respondents said that they would be interested in a hike and bike trail along Ames Creek. It was 75%. And improving pedestrian safety on BK Road is of utmost importance. In addition to having more options, more businesses which cater to local residents, and also creating a more pedestrian-friendly environment. We're among the top 3 items that households would like to see improved on Rollingwood's commercial corridor. And finally, regarding mobility, 50% of respondents would like to see traffic calming improvements within the neighborhood, and 48% would like to see improved pedestrian and bike mobility. So a brief introduction. The survey was open for 2 weeks in July, and we definitely wanted to get the word out as much as possible to increase participation. So next door, the city website, social media, I think the text blasts were tremendously helpful. And we based the estimated number of households on US Census data, and using a 95% confidence level, we knew that we would achieve a statistically significant result if we received 224 responses. And we beat that, and we received 270 responses, or approximately a 50% response rate. So we're very happy with that. And for those of you who might be new to the comprehensive planning process, why is gathering public input so important? Obviously, gathering public input helps us to identify what the community sees as key needs, and also enables local leadership to make the decisions that reflect the community's values and aspirations. So our hope and our goal is to meld together data, community input, and analysis, and that will form the basis of the comprehensive plan and the policy. So 96% of respondents stated that they live in Rollingwood, and we also had folks who work in Rollingwood. 8%, 4% own and operate a business, and 2% elected officials, and then 4% also selected other, and I put those comments to the side of how they define themselves. Some city commission members, some people who own rental properties, etc. We also were curious as to where people were within the community. So we divided the map into sections, and we got a pretty even response, which we think is excellent, from different sections within the community. So about 30% of respondents live in section 4, and 31% section 2, and 36% section 3. So it's a pretty even spread of answers.
And only 7 from the commercial corridor actually responded.
So a large amount of the folks who responded have lived in Rollingwood for over 10 years, 57%. But there is, of course, almost a quarter of the respondents are sort of this newer cohort of folks who have lived in the community for less than 5 years. And as I mentioned before, definitely a community of families. So we have 52% of folks living in households with 4 to 5 people. And there's also many couples and probably smaller families with 2 to 3 people, with 39% of answers. Unsurprisingly, the vast majority of folks do anticipate living and working in Rollingwood for the next 10 years, 97%. But of the folks who did say no, oh, could you go back, Sean, real quick?
Sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to point out that of those that said no, the answers we received were downsizing after kids have gone to college, also retirement, or concerns about paying higher taxes upon retirement. So we had 47% of respondents in their mid-30s to late 40s, and then a relatively even spread of 29%, 50 to 64, and 23% over 65. 60% of respondents have children under 18, which makes sense considering you guys have such an excellent school district. And when asked about how to describe Rollingwood today, this is a word cloud. So the words that are the largest receive the most amount of responses. So community, safe, changing, friendly, quiet were among some of the many words used to describe the community.
I had to explain what Mayberry was to Kathy and Erasmo.
So when asked about what people love most about living in Rollingwood, as I mentioned, Location, the school district, and the sense of safety came up the most. But many other great qualities, including the character of Rollingwood, the proximity to Zilker, and the size came up as well. So when asked about what do you think are the most important issues facing Rollingwood today, this was an open-ended question. So we based our analysis on the number of mentions that certain topics received, and that's what those numbers are. So for drainage, 50 respondents said drainage was the most important issue. For overbuilding of residential properties, 35 people or households mentioned that as a top issue. And then I wanted to break that one down because I heard a lot of different things in addition to the overbuilding in terms of what the concerns were. So loss of tree canopy, a feeling of a loss of identity with the home sizes, concerns that flooding may be exacerbated. So these were certain things that were coming up with that topic. Also increased traffic within the community, aging and inadequate infrastructure, and a desire for communication from local government, improved commercial on Bee Cave Road, speeding, and improving walkability and sidewalks were among the top answers. So this question asked about the familiarity with past studies. And interestingly, so the 4 studies from the left, the Rollingwood Needs Assessment, the Commercial Corridor Study, the Retail Market Analysis, and the Infrastructure Improvement Plan. So over 50% of respondents said they had never heard of these studies. In contrast, over 50% of respondents were at least familiar with the Parks Master Plan and the City Branding Initiative.
And, you know, Kathy has mentioned before, I think part of that is the communication and outreach they had in the Parks and City Branding Initiatives was maybe a little bit different. And so that's good feedback as we're moving forward with the rest of this plan in terms of just, you know, your citizenry is going to be more bought in and familiar the more that they are involved. And that's something we're committed to.
Thanks, John. So when asked about one major improvement that they would like to see within the next 10 years, better commercial options on Bee Cave Road got the most amount of mentions, 31. Improved drainage, of course. Improving walkability and adding sidewalks in areas, and residents had specific suggestions about what those areas should be. Enhancing and maintaining the sense of safety, which is very important to everybody. And also improving the need to improve the city facilities, and general infrastructure improvements also came up. In particular, concerns with cell service, internet service, and the potential to bury power lines came up. And in terms of what would help to bring the community together and strengthen community connection, overwhelmingly, residents would like to see more community events. Obviously, post-COVID would be an important aspect of that. Also, a desire for open and more communication from local leadership, sidewalks and walkability improvements, central meeting places, which I think could definitely be addressed and connected to perhaps more options on Bee Cave, and improved outreach as well. Oh, there we go. That one was coming up a little blurry for me. So I just wanted to share, is it coming up blurry for other people, just me? Some of the suggestions that the community contributed, because I thought they were great. You know, a meet and greet, coffee at City Hall with police chief and city manager. Maybe more utilization of the parks. There were some great suggestions about movie nights or small concerts and intimate gatherings in the park, and just, you know, planning some more events. I think a lot of community members would love to see that. So in terms of improvements to Rollingwood Park that community members would like to see, 50% would like to see an improvement or maintenance of the existing walking trail. In addition, additional shade in certain areas, particularly by the playscapes and sporting fields when parents are there with their children and would like to have a little more shade and cover. And also 49% discussed an interest in new trails through the wooded area of the site. We also asked about the potential for a hike and bike trail along Ames Creek, and 75% of respondents said that they would be interested, and 25% said no. And of those that were not interested, we wanted to know, so what were your concerns? And the most common answers we received was concerns about more traffic and people, particularly non-residents, using the trail. Some responded that they just weren't sure, it depends. Others said they didn't feel that it was a priority, concerns about cost, and also that it may attract more homeless individuals into the community. And here we were just interested in seeing, in terms of who said yes, what areas of the city they lived in. And we have a pretty even spread between section 2 and 4 of the community. 58 households said they would be interested. And in section 3, 74 households would be interested. We also asked about the quality and dependability of the city services. And of course, there's a lot of information here, so I'll just go quickly and highlight some top things. But 54% of residents feel that the police is excellent. 38% feel that the electricity is very good. In terms of parks and rec, 41% say very good, and the sewer system, 35% say very good.
And Kathy, if I can just, I want to just say, you should really look at combining the excellent and very good when you're looking at this. And same thing, when we go to the next slide, look at the fair and poor and combine those percentages. So, you know, the police are doing pretty good. You know, they about 90% of the people said they are doing a very good job or excellent job.
Yeah, it's a great point. So with storm drainage, definitely have 31% good, but 27 and 21% going between fair and poor. So definitely something that residents would like to see addressed. In addition, telecommunications, that came up a lot, internet service, cell service being poor within the community. So 27% said fair and 27% said poor. The water system was good, 31%, but it's pretty dispersed among the different options. Road maintenance, 43% said good. And then finally, trash and recycling, 47% said excellent. A lot of folks said very good as well.
And, you know, not to interrupt Kathy's flow, because you're doing a great job, Kathy, but I wanted to just mention that, you know, the city really should continue to do this exact same survey on an annual basis, not necessarily on all the other things, but specifically on the services, and just track how you're doing. That's a really good way to evaluate, you know, how the city is doing on your comprehensive plan.
Yeah, a great point. So we also wanted to find out, is there anything that you feel is missing in terms of public services or amenities? The most common answer was no, which is great. People feel fulfilled and happy with the services provided. But sidewalks did come up in certain areas, in addition to perhaps more options for bulk trash pickup, composting, and then, of course, the food and beverage options and improved internet service. When asked, what do you think about Rollingwood's commercial corridor today? A majority of folks said they feel it needs more restaurants, retail, coffee shops. A lot of folks also mentioned that they felt the appearance could use improvement, that it feels a little bit tired, or that certain buildings may need like a new coat of paint. So these were some of the comments we heard. I should comment that number 3 needs improvement. I think that it could have potentially gone into number 1. The thing is, they weren't as specific. They just said need improvement, so I left that as is. Then some more general comments that it's good, it's okay. Some concerns about traffic, but definitely some interest also in just creating more sales tax revenue. And which aspects of Rollingwood's commercial corridor would you like to see improved? So safety definitely came up as an option, an important one. A lot of folks feel that it's a little unsafe, some of the crossings there, and that they would like that to be improved. Some suggestions that came up was extending the time that pedestrians are allowed to cross, or a flashing crosswalk, for example. And tied into that is just creating a more pedestrian-friendly environment, and also more businesses which cater to local residents. When you think about the future of the Bee Cave commercial corridor, what aspects of future development would you like to see? And I think for this, I will just focus on the answers that received the highest amount of responses, but there's a lot here. So when we asked about 2 to 3, 4-story mixed use that creates a nice buffer, 50% of respondents said they may support with more information, which I think just speaks to the necessity for education, letting everybody in the community know what are the different options, what would that look like, so that they really feel like they understand what that would look like for them. 51% fully support the trail along Ames Creek. In terms of 1 to 2-story commercial, so how do you feel about what exists right now, and if that development pattern was continued? 54% said they may support with more information. So I think that just speaks to, again, the necessity to show everybody the different options that are available and what that would look like for tax revenue and resident experience, etc. And finally, 58% fully support development that is aesthetically pleasing and supports Rollingwood's tax base. So I think that speaks to residents being interested in having more sales tax revenue, helping to alleviate the tax burden on residents, and also just having a cohesive design and architecture that looks good and fits in with the community. And again, with this one, we just were curious as to the folks who said that they may support with more information, where they were dispersed throughout the community. So 38 households in section 2 may support with more information, and that's the section closest to the Bee Cave commercial corridor. 53 households may support with more information in section 3, and 33 households in section 4. How often do you visit the commercial area in Rollingwood in a typical week? So we had a couple times a week was the most common answer, about 43%, and also once a week, 21%. And we were thinking that's probably a lot of Trader Joe's.
You know, so we did a lot of interviewing throughout this process, and in interviewing one of your retailers, Eclectic, he was really surprised how very few Rollingwood residents shop at his store, and either online or in store. And I think that really provides an opportunity for your economic development group to start bridging some of that communication gap with your residents. And we can talk more about that a little bit later.
And what changes would lead you to visit the commercial corridor more often? So overwhelmingly, more restaurants, retail options, bars. Respondents mentioned that they would like family-friendly options, not particularly chains, but local businesses that they could walk to and spend time with their family and their friends. Of course, a more pedestrian-friendly environment, which ties into these common themes of safety. They want to be able to get across Bee Caves Road and feel safe about it with their family. In general, just more options and choices, none, and also aesthetically pleasing would lead them to come more often. Switching over to mobility improvements. So what mobility improvements should be a priority for Rollingwood? 50% said traffic calming improvements within certain areas in Rollingwood, and also improving bike and pedestrian mobility with more designated lanes. I will point out that improving pedestrian and walker mobility was definitely more of a priority for most folks as opposed to bike mobility. In your opinion, what are Rollingwood's most important transportation issues? Definitely these common themes here, but a lack of pedestrian infrastructure and bicycle infrastructure, 55%, and also pedestrian safety, 45% for the top one. We also were curious about what the residents thought about connecting the neighborhood to the commercial corridor and if there are specific sections that we should focus on. Of the most common recommendations, Edge Grove Drive came up. A lot of residents felt that that intersection was a little unsafe to cross and could be improved. Rollingwood Drive also came up in certain different sections, and also a trail on Eanes Creek and the suggestion of a pedestrian bridge over Rollingwood Drive. And then also some folks said that they didn't want that or didn't feel that it was needed. And finally, we had just a comment box at the end for any other feedback. And the most common feedback was just that they love living in Rollingwood and that they're very happy to be involved in the process and connected to this comprehensive plan. Some folks said no other comment, or also just keep Rollingwood as is, no changes needed. But I did want to share some of these really positive comments from your community members. And in terms of how people would like to receive communication about the comprehensive plan, 89% overwhelming majority said email. And in the other responses, we did get some folks saying that the text works very well, the text box as well. So something to keep in mind. And I'll briefly touch also on the interviews and the focus groups. So we conducted various focus groups and interviews with community members. We spoke to approximately 26 community members, from residents to business owners, city staff, city council, task force, RCDC, and also the planning and zoning members as well. And here are some of the common themes that very much aligned with the same things, many of the same things that we've heard throughout the survey. A lot of folks would like to improve walkability within the community and a focus on pedestrian safety. Some said that they felt that the commercial currently turns its back on Eanes Creek and that it's an asset of the community. But of course, flooding needs to be addressed, and there were some different recommendations on how to do that. The importance of transparency and open communication throughout this process was very important to everybody that we spoke with. In terms of the Bee Cave commercial corridor, of course, just enhancing that community experience by providing more options and also generating more sales tax revenue to alleviate some of that tax burden on residents came up often. The demographics, some changes in the community, but the community is intergenerational and ultimately very much unified on many of these key themes. The need to address infrastructure, drainage, power lines, of course, telecommunications if possible. And finally, residential development came up often, and the lack of impervious cover restrictions were a concern for some people. And I think that pretty much sums it up. I know I went through that very quickly.
You did a very good job on that. So, we're going to shift gears, and I just want to say there are still cities in the United States that do comprehensive plans based solely on public feedback. And you guys have chosen what I think is a very smart decision for you, especially after you see some of these slides, where you have asked us to, also look at the fiscal impacts of some of these land use decisions. So that your decisions about how Rollingwood is going to grow and the things that you're going to do to put in place to make Rollingwood a better community are also tapered with some fiscal realities. So I want to just first start by talking about what your current tax revenue is. About 3.1 million of that, about 69% of it comes from property tax, 31% from sales tax. And when you look at the property tax revenue breakdown, about 65% of that is on the residential side, and about 35% of that is from the commercial side. And when you compare Rollingwood to, we've actually compared you to Westlake, Lakeway, and Bee Cave, there are some interesting things that pop up. And so, there's two charts here. The one on the left is just sales tax per capita. The one on the right is tax revenue comparisons. And so for each city, we've stacked the property tax, which is in blue, below, and then the sales tax on top of that. So a couple of things, the sales tax per capita, Rollingwood has a pretty good amount of sales tax per capita, $625 per person. Westlake and Bee Cave are hard ones to compare yourself to, especially Bee Cave. Their per capita sales tax revenue is $1,300 per person. Westlake's is $1,000. Lakeway is much less than you. They're at around 250 to 300 per capita. And the chart on the right is interesting too, because when you look at, so for example, Westlake and Bee Cave that have such a high sales tax per capita, they also have the largest amount of sales tax as their overall tax revenue. You can see Rollingwood has less sales tax than Lakeway. Your property tax revenue again is making up just a little under 70%. So I think you guys are all familiar with the retail market analysis and gap study that the retail coach did for you all. We've had a couple opportunities to speak with Aaron Farmer there, and the bulk of this study basically just says you have about 450 million that is leaking from your community right now. Now, I've been involved in those retail leakage studies, and you're never ever going to reach that full amount. But I will say this: Rollingwood will never see a large or any large amount of that retail leakage with your current zoning restrictions. I can safely say that very few of your older developments will be redeveloped because of your existing zoning. That's, you might have another PUD or two that works around that, but for our assessment and our analysis, that's one of my strong opinions. So one of the things that we also looked at is, okay, what if Rollingwood was fully built out in the commercial area? I'm only talking about the commercial area right now, with your existing zoning ordinances, and again, not doing any other PUDs. What we analyzed and what we came up with is that your overall revenues would only increase by 5%, meaning you would only have a net increase of $152,000 per year. We'll bring that number up again, but that's a very important item for you guys to understand. Now, just to remind everybody about this fiscal analysis, kind of why we do it. So, we look at a couple of different scenarios of how you can develop so that you, the decision makers, can look at those numbers, pepper that with the community input that you just got, and then give us consultants advice on how we should be moving forward in the rest of the comprehensive plan process. So what we did is, again, we created a model. We looked at 4 different development types on the commercial corridor. The base zoning, as we already talked about, it is looking at your current zoning, commercial zoning, and at full build out, what that looks like. I know there has been one question about what zoning map we use and was that zoning map legitimately approved, etc. What I'm going to say is the one discrepancy that I do recognize from that one zoning map is the small residential parcel by the park. That has no bearing on this fiscal analysis. So if that might still be a question, but don't think that's a big issue for us right now in our analysis. We are definitely working with the attorneys and the city staff to make sure that everything that we do as we're moving forward to adopting the comprehensive plan and then moving into the zoning ordinance development is all by the books. So we'll make sure we do that. A couple of quick things on our model assumptions. Two things that are the same in every one of these scenarios is the property and sales tax rates are all the same. Also, the employment assumptions are all the same. We use a regional factor for that, so we know that there's going to be about 3 office jobs for 1,000 square feet, 2 retail jobs for 1,000 square feet. Another assumption, and this is might be a little complicated to understand, but we also are modifying the floor to area ratio, or FAR, and the land cost per square foot in each of these scenarios. So FAR is a pretty simple thing to understand, but it's sometimes difficult to explain. And this chart on the right over here, and I know you guys received this in your packet, it helps to explain that out a little bit. But what I will say is, on the lower right, what Erasmo Cantu with Pegasus did is he looked at your current zoning standards and the built environment, and he created what is your base scenario FAR, which we would estimate that at 0.3. And then we have created a different FAR for each of the other scenarios. Scenario A is 1, scenario B is 1.5, and then scenario C is 2. One of the things I wanted to mention too is, and I'm talking to another client of mine about this right now too, because it's just very important to understand, is what you get, what the city gets based on the use. So, you know, industrial, for example, you get a lot of direct jobs. Your sales tax is typically kind of low. You might have a little bit depending upon what you're selling, what you're producing. You're not going to have any hotel tax, so you can see what your direct tax is. Your office development really yields, I would arguably say, the least amount of revenue. Your hotel can generate a pretty good amount of tax, hotel tax, direct tax, sometimes sales tax, depending upon what else is going on the ground floor. Retail does pretty well on sales tax, direct tax, and jobs. But the point is office. I just wanted to really reiterate that office is not always going to be the best use for you. It is not going to yield that much revenue for the city, and it is definitely not in sales tax, and property tax is going to be pretty limited as well. So as you're moving forward in your planning, it is just always something to remember. So the 3 different scenarios that we've done here, your base scenario, we've already talked about that. That's your existing zoning maxed out at 2 floors. And this is the FAR that we know is already kind of in place for your development. Scenario 2 is also maxed out at 2 floors, but with a larger, the 1.0 FAR. The scenario B is 3 stories maxed out with a 1.5 FAR, and then 4 stories on scenario C. So I'd like to just kind of illustrate what some of those scenarios are talking about. Again, I just wanted to reiterate, especially for anybody who's kind of new to this project and might be listening. In this scenario, first of all, we're not saying we're changing the zoning anywhere. We are only just analyzing scenarios, kind of like SimCity, if anybody knows what that is, to be able to kind of see what the fiscal impacts are in each of those different scenarios. So the real key takeaways are, you know, first of all, your total revenue is 3.1. With your current zoning, your base scenario at full build out is only going to be yielding that 150,000 more, or 153,000. But you can see as you start increasing these, you get in scenario A, where you still are maxed at 2 stories, but you have a larger FAR, 5.4 million. So you've gone up 2 million. Scenario B is 7 million. And then scenario C, you all knew this, was going to yield the most amount of revenue. So I'm going to talk about each one of these in specifics. So the chart, that table I just showed is up there on the left, just for comparison's sakes. But you know, and then you can see the chart down below, current revenue, and then the base scenario, only 5% increase again from the current revenue to the base scenario. The green is sales tax revenue here, and the blue is property tax revenue. So you can see in each of those scenarios what that breakdown looks like. You know, scenario A, B, and C, the property tax revenue is pretty much the same in every one of those. The big increase you see is the sales tax revenue. So this just illustrates the percent increases in overall tax revenue from your base scenario to scenario A, 77%, or from your base scenario to scenario B, which is 126%, or base scenario to scenario C, 164%. Pretty substantial amount. And again, you can see those differences in income for a revenue from each of those different scenarios. One of the other factors that's involved, and I think this is important for you guys to be familiar with, and is that you guys have a fairly small population right now, and by looking at some of these different scenarios, the number of households is going to increase substantially. If you, for example, if you look at scenario A, you're not going to have any more new households, but you'll have about 4,200 new jobs. Scenario B, you'll have about 756 new households and 3,200 new jobs. In scenario C, you could have 1,000 new households and 4,600 jobs. So, from a voter perspective, your voter block changes, doesn't it? In each of those scenarios, B and C in particular. Basically, your residential population will be twice as much as it is right now. That is just something you need to be familiar with. The other thing I wanted to point out is that it is a good thing to have some daytime jobs there. As much as I kind of shunned office use as not a great revenue maker, one of the things it does do is, if you have a good pedestrian or bicycle network in your community and you have a good amount of daytime traffic, then those retailers are going to have much more traffic and thrive in the daytime hours versus not just in the evening hours. So, one of the elephants in the room, if we will, is, as Kathy went through and showed you the survey feedback that we've received from the 4 different areas of the community, clearly the folks above Ridgeline, and we all knew that this was going to be the case, have a lot of concerns. If not, they do not want anything more than what can be built there right now. I just wanted to say that a couple things. One, there does seem to be in the residents and the respondents in that particular area an interest if they know more, and an interest if it's fiscally responsible to the city, and an interest if you can screen and protect visually through either landscaping, material usage, etc. I brought up the point to your city staff last week. I have a friend who I was in the Peace Corps with, but he's the county planner in Oregon, in the area called the Dalles, D-A-L-L-E-S. Columbia River runs right through that area. And the Columbia River Gorge is a national protected area, but you can still build private houses on there. One of his jobs is to make sure that nobody builds a house with a roof that is not the color brown or green. You can absolutely dictate what's going to be in your design standards. And so the sky is kind of open on that. Know that it does add to the development costs, but your property there along Bee Cave is such primo that if you do allow any type of mixed use, I guarantee you're not going to have developers that are truly going to balk at that, and it's going to make it a much, much better project for everybody. One of the things I wanted to say, because there has been a lot of questions about this, is and I just want to say, some of my best friends are commercial brokers. Don't hold that against me. But I am trying to constantly keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on right now with commercial, retail, industrial, and what developers, investors, equity groups, and brokers are all thinking about this. And one of the things is there's definitely going to be a trend away from the mall and the large shopping centers and more towards mixed-use development. The retailers are really struggling right now, as you can imagine. The gentleman with Collective said, thank God he has an online presence. It's now more than 50%, if not 75% of all of his sales. There will be retailers that will close down if there's not another federal stimulus. A lot of folks speculate that we're probably going to lose 20 to 30% of retailers who are going to close down permanently. One of the things that you guys have, oddly enough, the offices that have the single office with just one door you can go in and out, those are actually doing very well right now because, you're not having to worry about other people kind of coming in and coming out. Industrial is also doing really well, which I'm not recommending for Rollingwood. Office is going to take a while to really come back. For those of you who kind of follow some of that news, Google and Apple have announced that they're not letting any of their employees come back until at least June of 2022. But I also know that there are new office projects that are being planned, financed, and permitted throughout Austin right now. So, it's going to be different, but the bottom line is to the extent that you have retail and allow there to be outdoor space, and the backside of the retail along Eanes Creek could really be an amazing space for that. Those retailers are going to do well. They're going to weather the storm. So I think I went through this all, hopefully not too fast. I know you're going to have some questions about all this, but we're not necessarily saying this is our recommendation. We can give one if you would like, but we really wanted to just give you the information. There's a lot of information that we've shared, and I'm sure that you guys are going to have some questions. One of the last things I wanted to end with is, the number one thing that came up is drainage. That is definitely, clearly the number one thing that folks want addressed. You all had an infrastructure plan that was created. There's a substantial cost to a lot of that. Just the drainage alone is $17 million. There's no way you're going to be able to pay for that, even with bonds, if you only have an additional $150,000 in revenue coming in. It is just a flat out, sorry to do this, slap in your face kind of fact. You're going to have to look at redoing something, and you're not going to be able to address these drainage issues unless you address your zoning and allow for more commercial development that is in line with what the community wants, and provides more revenue into the pockets of the city. And the last thing I want to say here, and then I'm happy to go back into any of the presentation, is kind of what's coming up, what's next. So we are in the midst of drafting some of the early chapters of the comprehensive plan, the introduction, some of the community input. After tonight, we're going to really get more into some of the other chapters of future land use, et cetera. We're providing an update to P&Z on the 19th and presenting the city council again the comprehensive plan draft. We are going to ask the city to do some reviews of the comprehensive plan, and then present that to you and the Planning Commission. And then in September, you can see how that lays out. So, if all goes well by September 23rd, we could have the comprehensive plan adopted and then moving into the next zoning ordinance. I want to just reiterate, and I know one of your council members mentioned this to some staff too, is that we need to really, really make sure that your citizenry is absolutely informed about what we're doing, and we're committed to that. I know your city staff is committed to that. So if there's any feedback you have for us, we'll do that. So with that, I want to go ahead and stop my presentation and see what questions or feedback you guys might have.
Great. Thank you, Sean. I tell you what, guys, I'm going to open this up to the dais first. And again, just as kind of a reminder, I'm going to say the dais, folks with the city, both boards, commissions, and elected officials have been designated as panelists. If you're designated as such, have some questions or comments, now's a great time. You can either try to raise your hand physically, and if I can see it on my screen, I'll call on you. Otherwise, click the little hand button or icon rather down at the bottom of your screen, and Amber will get it teed up for you.
Mayor, would you like me to stop sharing, or I can keep sharing because I have a feeling people might want to reference some of the slides.
Yeah, I think maybe continue sharing. That way, we've got some pretty well-educated folks on this panel.
Yeah.
My guess will be directed questions. The first hand I see raised, Amy Patillo, if you want to go ahead, it'd be great.
Sure. The one thing I just quickly wanted to note on this next step slide is there's some dates on here that I was trying to align with my understanding of our schedule. And since we may have community members watching who are also looking at those dates, are these all TBD? Because some of them aren't on our official schedule yet.
Yeah, these are dates we put out to the city. We need to finalize these, but I know that the city staff has already worked to see that they're going to line up. But Amber or Carrie or Ashley, you might have another reaction.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to relook at these and make sure that they're on the council's calendar.
Can I
know we
also
switched
add,
a few dates.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Amber, but can I also just add one key element that's really transpired in these strange times? There's a lot of, as we noted, we're a family-oriented community. 60% of the families have kids that are talking in terms of schooling right now. There's a lot that's up in the air. These meetings right through August. I can imagine that's going to really complicate some folks' schedules, and at the risk of pushing this out or unnecessarily delaying, I think that feedback and people being able to properly focus on this very important issue, we may consider trying to extend this maybe from August, September, more into September and October as people try to get their feet under them with some of these other changes. Just a suggestion, something to consider scheduling wise.
Okay.
Yeah, and my main concern in bringing it up is just that I want to make sure that if people access the slides or are watching right now, that these are all TBD, and it's important to continue to check the schedule. And then we did that survey asking people how they want to hear about this, and we heard email is a key way that a lot of our community are wanting to hear. And so is there a way for us to provide emails when we do get these dates set?
Definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, Amber, I think we can put our heads together probably tomorrow and probably come up with a proposed final schedule. And whenever we do get to the point of final, I think it's a good idea just to list every single date up on that website, just to make sure people know what's up and when.
Yeah, I think that's great because, I mean, I'm looking at the survey and it seems like the communication is an issue. And, we as a city comply with state law in the way that we notice meetings and provide notice. And I know that there's residents who are wanting more communication than that. And that does require our staff to use extra time. And it also requires us to make sure that we know which communication formats are effective. So it sounds like, your survey says email. So I just want to make sure we're going to get emails out that give people the right days.
Yeah, and Ashley, I meant to ask you, are you recording this? And is that possible to, is it possible to post the recording for people to hear that?
We will.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
this will be
All right.
posted where our team videos
Okay.
usually go.
I think, Amy, to your point, I think it'd be really interesting actually to send an email out with a link specifically to this, because there's a lot of education in what we just went through, right? We just took, I can't believe that was just an hour. Frankly, I thought that was already 2 hours of information, but it's a lot of information. And I think for folks that, they're struggling with finding the time to sit down from 3 to 4:30, that could be a good option for them to catch up.
I think that would be great, especially if the survey said, how do you want to hear about this in the future? If people answered email, getting that email. I don't recall off the top of my head what the other formats were, but updating the website, I think some people answered mail, which I'm not sure that we would have the budget. We'd have to budget to send out a letter with the link to come watch this. So I think email and the website make logical sense to me.
Great, thank you, Amy. Do we have any other folks on the dais, maybe some that are joining by phone, that have thoughts or questions for Pegasus? Sarah, I got you. Sarah Hudson.
Yep. Okay. I guess I was very surprised to see the different scenarios that were laid out with the financial analysis, because there was no question in the survey that asked about adding residential on bee caves. The idea that we would want to go from 500 approximate homes in Rollingwood to adding twice that many condos or apartments and totally changing the makeup of our community in order to reduce our taxes. You know, people don't move to Rollingwood to have cheap taxes. That's not anybody's primary reason to come to Rollingwood. And so totally changing the character of the neighborhood in order to reduce the taxes, to me, was never a part of this discussion. So that really concerns me, especially after we just went through the whole issue with the proposed relocation of the police department. For us to then come in and say, all you folks that bought homes on Timberline that have views because everything built on bee caves is short and you have a view over the top, and now we're going to come in and, oh look, we can raise more tax money if we build 4-story buildings and channelize the creek and put in a hike and bike trail in your backyard. Wouldn't that be great? We had all kinds of people complaining about the idea of moving the police station because they didn't buy a house next to a police station. I mean, it just, quite frankly, seems kind of tone deaf to me that we would suggest that, especially after what we just went through.
May I, if I may, just respond to a couple of things, Sarah? Thank you for sharing that. The question was very specific, and we did mention residential. I want to be very clear about that. Mixed use, it does include residential, and so that's the way that that question was worded. And then the other point is, this is the crux of the matter for you all as council members, right? You've seen the cost of the needed infrastructure. You know the cost of a potential police station. You know, as we've just shown you, if you do nothing on Bee Cave and just let things be built out, you'll only have an additional $150,000 of revenue for the city. You know, I'm not your bond counsel, I'm not your city finance advisor, but I mean, we can all say that you're not going to be able to do much with an extra $150,000. Certainly, you won't be able to address those drainage issues. So I'm not necessarily trying to combat you, Sarah. I'm just saying this is the crux of the issue, right? I mean, you represent definitely one of those opinions of, you know, this isn't why we moved here. We want everything to stay the same, et cetera. And while we did definitely hear some of that sentiment, it's pretty clear from the survey that folks want things to be able to walk to. You know, I mean, there are very few places that people can walk to to go to a bar, go to a restaurant, et cetera, and they want some of their drainage fixed. So that's a challenge.
Go ahead, Amy.
Sure, thanks. I understand the point that Sarah's making, and I also, with what we've just gone through with the police station, but I do believe what Sean has said, that there was a question specific to this. And I would also say that like an ongoing conversation for several years among older residents has been the desire that there would be some type of residential housing on Bee Caves Road or in smaller condo type areas that would be an opportunity for people who have lived here for a long time who want to downsize, but there's nowhere to downsize in our city. And so I thought it was a thoughtful presentation and I also appreciated the opportunity to be able to see maybe the biggest build out we could do versus the no build, because now it gives us a range of different opportunities to discuss. And I think it's important, and I think Sean has clarified this too, that I don't believe that this report is indicating that the council has asked our consultant to give us a full build out scenario and that it's somehow what we're going to just push through. I haven't heard any of that conversation. This is our first time to be able to talk about it and see all these different scenarios and hear the implications of each of them. So I do appreciate right now the sentiment for some residents of feeling like the council is evaluating different things in our city and that can feel unsettling. And my invitation would be, especially the residents on Timberline, if scenario C seems really, really stressful, because I feel like we've gotten emails from residents that they are under a high level of stress in contemplating something like scenario C. My encouragement would be for those residents that I want to have conversations about scenario A, something in the middle where we actually have a conversation about doing something more than just keeping it where it is right now. And I think that's what we're invited to as a community right now, is to figure out how do we take what we've been given by the experts and then who know how to analyze these things and then find something that aligns with our community values.
And Sarah, the point you bring up, that's why I brought that up about the number of households. Because if I was a resident of Rollingwood, I would be like, okay, we're totally going to lose our voting strength to new residents who might now represent 50% of our population. Totally valid point. And so Amy's perspective there is, what we can do after this is maybe come up with something that's in between, or maybe that's something between like 2 and 3. And then the other thing is, when you get to the point, you have to remember, this is only a future land use map and a comprehensive plan that we're talking about, right? The real crux of the devil in the details comes in the zoning ordinance. And when you get to the future land use mapping and the planning, it's very possible that you all might decide, and with the planning commission, et cetera, you might decide, well, you know what? I actually like the idea of having that scenario 4 maybe at a different part of Bee Cave Road. Maybe that 4-story is not appropriate right at that intersection, right below Ridgeline. Maybe we want to limit that at 3 stories, or maybe we want to allow residential in only these parcels versus. So there's a lot that you can do to kind of mitigate some of those questions and issues that you're bringing up. It's a balance, yeah.
I guess the big concern is that there was no, the options that were included with the mixed use or the additional residential was another 756 households or another 1,008 households. There wasn't anything, if we're talking about, condos for our older residents, there wasn't anything about 50 or 100 or, some small portion. The options presented were like doubling or tripling the size of the community with condos and apartments.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think Wendy Hunley also has her hand raised.
Hi, yes. So I appreciate having all of this information put out there for our community. And I just want to say, to reiterate, that we all received this at the same time. We hired these consultants who are experts to help us look at a comprehensive plan for our community, because it's legislatively mandated and it's something that we have to do to be in compliance with state law, but also that it's a roadmap for us as we develop in the future. And that our consultants are looking at different scenarios, which we're all receiving together and processing together. But I also share concerns about changing the demographics on how development will affect houses along Timberline. And so for me as a city council person who's going to vote on a comprehensive plan, I just want to make sure that we do thoughtfully look at that and look at each parcel and how it connects with our neighborhood, and how these different scenarios can be looked at the Timberline location and across the street on Bee Caves, and just thoughtfully explore with our Planning and Zoning Commission and with our community what options there may be to hybrid this. And because although I appreciate having these different scenarios laid out and what the different revenue could be, that makes it clear to me that we do need to make some changes moving forward. But I don't think that the end result of what we're going to do is here presented today. It's going to be through the work we do coming up.
Thanks, Wendy. Just to, I guess, again, to emphasize something that we stated early, this is a data gathering exercise, right? And what we did is, as a community, going all the way back to, in one instance, 1999, and through 2013, and then over the course of more recently, the last 5 to 6 years. What we've done are grabbing consultancies and experts to put together roadmaps for us for various items, our water and streets, our municipal infrastructure needs, our drainage improvement needs, our water line needs. What this is intended to do, guys, is to gather, again, additional data and input directly from the community so that we can start tying all this stuff together. We have a long list of, as a community, of both needs and wants. That is illustrated on, I believe it's page 63. And that's just kind of, I'd argue, the tip of the iceberg for us, right? We know we have, by any number of estimates, nearly $30 million worth of deferred maintenance, right? These are items that range from a varying degree of want to a very high degree of need. And the question that we're faced with is, how do we pay for them? And the question that we're all going to work through today and going forward over the next couple of months is, how as a community do we want to address this data that we have, and how do we put a framework around it? Understanding fine well that if we make choice A, B, C, D, or a Z, for instance, what that opportunity cost actually is for us as a community. Just to, again, underscore, these are not end-all scenarios. This is a starting point for a conversation where Pegasus has come in and synthesized some of our data with the understanding that during this conversation, there will be more input, more information that comes in, ideally from even larger swaths of our community than have already weighed in. With that, do we have additional conversation or questions from the dais before I open it up to the public who've been very patiently waiting for us?
This is Jordan. Can y'all hear me?
Hey, Jordan. Yep, we can hear you.
Hey, how are you? Hello from Clovis, New Mexico, outside of it anyways. As I sit in the middle of absolutely nothing and wonder about how we're going to be looking at the future of Rollingwood, it sounds like there's also a lot of attention paid to the commercial corridor, which seems to be a wonderful place to put our attention. And yet, drainage and overbuilding of housing that came up would affect the other three quadrants. is there an opportunity to do some more data gathering towards the needs and wants for our currently single-family zoning in Rollingwood?
Hey Jordan, safe travels to you. If I can just reiterate your question, I think I understand. You're asking if it's possible for us to survey the residents specifically on some of the residential issues. And that's very doable for us.
If it's surveys or another form of data gathering, yeah, I'd be interested. It sounds like, you know, drainage and overbuilding of housing would affect those other areas. Yes.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I don't always do this, but I actually think it's a good idea to use a survey, come back again about halfway through a project and survey the residents again. Because I mean, even now we're talking about other, like maybe another scenario or et cetera. So your question and the information you're wanting, I'm suggesting we may want to just wait just a little bit longer until we get a little bit further on when, you know, the council might be saying, hey, I really want to know what the residents feel about, you know, scenario Z. So yes is a short answer. Jordan, and then let's talk some more about that. But we may want to also combine other potential questions with that same survey too.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Mayor. I'm good.
Thanks for joining us, Jordan. Do we have anybody else? I've got. I don't see any hands raised on the videos that I have. Amber, do we see anybody else with their hand raised?
We have Ryan Clinton. Ryan,
Okay, so,
if you will unmute yourself.
So yeah. Okay, well, we're opening it up to the public now, just for clarity's sake there. Hi, Ryan.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. I appreciate it. First of all, I want to thank Councilmember Hudson for the remarks. I think she is speaking to more than just feelings of the Rollingwood residents, and I think that her concerns should be taken more seriously than they are by the consultant. There's a seismic disconnect between the priorities identified in the survey and the solution, the single solution proposed, even in the presence of questioning that is objectively biased in favor of the solution proposed by the consultant. If you look to slide 32, which is the slide on when you think of the future BKH corridor, what are the aspects that you would like to see? A solid third of the city residents who responded said that under no circumstances would they want a 3 to 4 story building. Another 50% said that under current circumstances they would not want, yet it was presented here as if this was a good thing, that we just quote unquote need to educate our citizens. Our citizens are educated. We're very educated. We're a smart group of people. We don't need to be educated by a consultant on how this will impact us. I can tell you personally that it's funny and clever to say, oh yeah, we'll have pretty trees on the roof. I will not be looking down at the roof. I will be looking up at a development that is behind my home. I'm one level above the one-story building that is currently on a strip mall on BKs. I will be looking up at this dream development of the consultants, not down on it. I will not be looking down at pretty trees. I will be looking up at the side of the building. If you go to I would invite all of you to come to my house and spend some time in my backyard. Go to Inwood Circle. And walk around and see how close that one-story building is to your multi-million-dollar homes that are built on it. And ask them, do you want to, again, they too will not be looking down at pretty buildings, they'll be looking up at them. If you look specifically to the data again, you'll see that only roughly 5%, again, if you look on slide number 31, 5% or 5, the consultant goes back and forth between number of people responding and percentage of responses. But on slide 31, it says over to the right, we have an increased commercial tax base was provided by 5, either, I assume that's 5% of the residents. If it's 5 of the respondents, that's even smaller. Yet you go to the next slide. Okay, so 5 people, which means what, 2%? 1%, something like that, yet we have 32% who under no circumstances want a development 3 to 4 stories. When you have that kind of disconnect between what's being reported by the consultant and the actual numbers, it reflects either a direction of the entity hiring the consultant or the personal bias of the consultants. And here, I think from the quote of Sean, I was just sort of dumbfounded. He said, "You guys are really smart not to be basing this on community input." I think that's incredibly telling, that you have a consultant who is not interested in basing this on community input, but is instead basing it on what he wants or what he sees. And if you look at, I'm sorry, Sean, but that's what you said. Maybe you didn't mean what you said, but that's what you said. And if you look at Sean's bio, one of the things he lists is developer. If what you have is a hammer, everything that you see is a nail. And it's not the only way to raise money. Yes, we have fiscal needs, but building big buildings to destroy homes along Timberline is not the only way to raise money for the city. And I would be curious if the city, if in this process, any of the people who would be directly negatively affected would have been interviewed. The people whose investments of their life savings would be destroyed had been interviewed. And I also think finally that it is telling that the fiscal analysis does not include any projection of the diminution in value of the homes, the multi-million-dollar, mine's not, but many of them are multi-million-dollar homes who will now be looking up at the back of a building if this goes through. And then finally, I want to say this is the wrong time to be doing this. If we're talking about embarking on something that will change the history of our city for 30 years, we should not be doing it when people can't even get in a room to talk to each other about it. It feels crammed down our throats right now. It will be devastating for me. I can tell you that during this meeting, my wife walked into my office and in tears saying, "We have to move." I know that stuff doesn't really matter to the consultant, but it matters to the real people here. We move here in part because it's a small community where we believe that the city council members care about the impact of their decisions on individuals because we know them personally and we believe that they care about us. But telling us that we're going to be looking in the back of a 4-story building or even a 3-story building because that's the only way that we have even suggested revenue can be raised is deeply upsetting. I hope that you will scratch this and start over. I know that you won't because that's not how cities operate. But I hope that you'll let us know soon because we need to put our house on the market if this is going through in order to try to save some of the investment that we've made into this home. Thank you.
Ryan, thanks for what's obviously a very heartfelt comment. For what it's worth, I hope that you have the council, I think that you do, pegged correctly, as well as our board commission members. Obviously, we care deeply about this community, not just because we know everybody, but I think in truth, it'll be greeted with a little bit of skepticism. We have good people trying to do good work here, all in a volunteer capacity. I understand where you're coming from, Sean and Kathy. I suspect it's part of it. I appreciate your level of professionalism, and again, I just want to underscore that these are just recommendations, guys, and that's not to suggest that these recommendations aren't having a real psychological impact on folks, and that's obvious. And I say recommendations. Maybe that's even too strong of a word, right? This is information. And the question that we're faced with now as a community is what bits of this information matter most to us? How do we prioritize it? And then how do we move forward? And so, Ryan, again, I want to thank you very much for a very heartfelt response and a very thoughtful response. Don't leave. We love having the Clintons here in town. You guys are fantastic folks. And I can assure you that any decision that this council makes, I've never seen them not be thoughtful in their approach. For what that's worth, I suspect drops in the bucket to what you guys are dealing with right now. So again, I appreciate it. Amber, do we have other hands that are raised?
Not right now.
Well, I know there are a number of other folks that are on the call today. I would encourage you, whether it's now on during this meeting or via email or phone calls or however you're comfortable, getting your information, preferably email in truth. That way we can make sure that everybody is apprised of the details, and we can avoid kind of the transparency issues that apparently raise their ugly head, I guess, when business is done via phone call. If we could encourage you to write your concerns down, write your thoughts down, positive, negative. Just try to be constructive is the only thing I would recommend there. And then please know that I trust that this council, we've got a number of our planning and zoning folks on here as well. I know they're going to be thoughtful in how they dig through this information.
Mayor,
With
we
that-
have Brooke Brown.
Perfect.
Brooke, you can unmute yourself now.
Hi, Brooke. Thanks.
Can you hear me? I am unmuted.
We can hear you, Brooke. Thanks.
I would like to ask again. I thought I heard the consultant say in the survey, residents were asked about multi-tenant properties in the commercial corridor, multi-tenant residential properties. I don't find that in the survey. And then second, I'd also like to know how the groups were picked that the consultant met with. I didn't have any, I haven't seen anything online in the city's information about the comprehensive plan that either sought participants for those meetings or identified how those participants were chosen. So if that could be addressed, I would be appreciative, and I'll mute myself now. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke. Sean, can you give us a little insight, I guess, on maybe the first question? How I think you noted that Pegasus reached out to 26 individuals throughout the city. How did you guys come across it?
That's correct, Mayor. What we did is we always know that in these kind of projects, we want to meet with different types of groups, residents, business owners, and then within the city, we wanted to meet with people that either committees or chairpersons of committees that are related to parks and recreation or economic development. So we gave that list of general types of people that we want to meet with to the city, and then city staff just identified those people. And we actually had a slew of, Kathy, maybe 50 people to begin with. And Kathy probably spent 2 weeks just kind of coordinating all of those interviews and focus groups, and we were able to meet up with 26 people.
Okay, so the goal, ultimately the goal was to meet with a few more, scheduling issues.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, summer vacations and COVID and technological issues, yeah.
Sure, understandable. Great, and so then we've had this is the second time it's been mentioned. Can you remember specifically the questions on the survey that would have addressed the multi-use aspect of the commercial corridor?
Sure.
Thank you.
Kathy, do you have that question pulled up? Because I don't, and I just want to make sure I have exactly the right terminology. We definitely didn't say anything about multi-tenant or anything like that. And then while she's looking for that, I'll answer the third question, which was, how did we come up with the geographical demarcation of the city? It was frankly, we wanted to separate out the commercial area. And so that was one. And then we looked at what is the most logical area to separate the other three areas. And, you know, we wanted to base it on roadways, et cetera. And so we just worked with the city to come up with what we thought is going to be kind of the best breakdown. But there's no other kind of rhyme or reason, or we didn't have any other ulterior motives with that. Kathy, did you find that question? Or those questions?
Yes. 20. Oh, I'm unmuted. Perfect. Yes. So it was question 20, and 3 to 4 story mixed use that creates a nice buffer between residents and BK Road.
And in our mixed use, anytime we use mixed use, did we define mixed use to say that it was going to have residential in it?
We did not. We just said mixed use.
Okay, all right. So, you know, Councilmember Houston, your point is accurate. And I think, you know, as Jordan was mentioning earlier, when we go back and survey the community on a couple of specific things, we can be more specific about that.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you both. Brooke, I hope that that answered your questions. I've got a hand raised from Councilmember Patillo.
Sure. I appreciate you all looking at the question specifically. I will say that when I read it, I understood the definition of mixed use to include a combination of residential, retail, and commercial in one building. But perhaps that is not clear to all who took the survey. And so I appreciate you all considering putting that survey question out again with a definition of mixed use that specifically says the definition of mixed use that's common in the industry, which is residential, commercial, and office.
Thanks, Amy. Do we have any additional comments or folks interested in the public?
Christy Finnegan, you
Hi,
can
Christy.
unmute. Hold on. There we go. Okay, you can unmute yourself now. Christy, you have to unmute yourself too. You have to do an additional step.
And Christy, it looks like you're on a computer. It would be in the bottom of your screen. And we've also heard that there potentially could be issues when you use Chrome as a browser to watch or to join the meeting. So that could be a potential issue.
Mayor, we've got Phil McDuffie. I could unmute him.
I tell you what, Christy, while you work on that, we're going to let Phil go. Take the mic, and then let's make sure we come back to Christy.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, Phil, you can unmute yourself.
You guys hear me? Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you, Phil.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Great.
Thanks.
I would just like to speak on behalf of some of my neighbors on Timberline. This definitely has stirred up quite a bit of discussion locally near me, and I would like to reiterate a lot of what Ryan said of people feeling like not only is this not an appropriate time, but also that a lot of the questions were leading either in their language or in their structure. Whether that was intentional or not, that is the perception that is occurring. And so I think defining exactly what things will look like, and then particularly having a way that people can express their opinions, and having those somehow compiled so that people feel like they're heard, that they're considered, and particularly the people that are most directly impacted are considered, will be helpful. I think, in regards to a lot of the stuff that was compiled, there were check boxes that were made available, but it is not, the lack of checking a box should be considered a very heartfelt saying, no, we do not want that. So that type of data collection seems to be at least perceived as being kind of not completely accurate. A lot of people I know are saying they don't want a trail back behind their house. They don't want this Waller Creek development. So with that, I'll be quiet, but I know that there are a lot of people on Timberline that really need to be heard in regards to what is being discussed here.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Phil. And just to reiterate, the point of this is to make sure that people are heard, whether they're on Timberline or Ridgewood or Vale. The idea is for everybody to have a voice, and hopefully this will be a thorough process, and folks will take advantage of the opportunity to speak, as you've done. Thank you very much, Phil. Amber, do we have other hands raised?
Christy is back.
Let's-
Yes, let me try
Yeah.
Christy.
Yeah, let's hear from Christy. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I am a Chrome user, diehard Google fan. First of all, this really concerns me. I first saw the branding initiative and I thought, why do we need branding when we have such a small community? And then I saw the police department and I was like, why do we need a new police department when we have such a small community? And then I saw the initiative to build a brand city hall. And I was like, why do we need a big city hall when we're such a small town? And then I never attended a city meeting before. I feel completely like sided and like hit across the head where it's like, pay attention to what these people are doing. And I'm so upset right now. And I moved here for the freaking Greenbelt and Zilker Park. I did not move here to have retail behind me like the Domain. I did not move here to expose my kids to retail, shopping, and have apartments next to me that are going to flood Eanes. Eanes is already overcrowded. These taxes are going to go to Eanes members too. We have the bee caves. When you pull out to bee caves, I've almost been hit twice pulling out of bee caves. When you pull out onto bee caves and I see what Westlake has done, they have expanded the roads. They're adding expansion to lanes because of the traffic. Are you including that in your models? That there will be space taken away in your parking lots to increase another 2 lanes? Because that's what's needed to turn on to MOPAC. You are not including any type of respect for the Greenbelt. You are not including anything that says we do admire all of the wildlife that we have. We have deer, we have bunny rabbits in Timberline. We have beautiful seasonal birds. We have all the great owls that you go to zoos for. We have them in our backyard. I am so upset with you guys right now. I can't even believe you're doing this. I'm very, very concerned. And I don't even know why a model was suggested to increase our population size by 125%. Who did that? Let alone 200%. Who is doing this? It is completely cutting me up my side. And I'm 35 years old. My husband founded a freaking billion-dollar company, billions of dollars that's worth. It's one of the biggest startups in San Francisco. And we're living modestly here, waiting to build our dream house 3 blocks away. I will not be on Timberline. I know this. I'm trying to preserve it for the next people who live here. What are you doing? Seriously. And I do not want a canal. I don't want you to keep on buying property strips from people behind Timberline. I know that you're buying their property strips. Why are you buying these? Like, why? That person backs up to a creek bed. Let's buy out their backyard. Why are you doing this? Please stop. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate your comments. One thing I can say with a degree of certainty is that the city, unless somebody has gone off and done this without any kind of city authority, I don't believe anyone has approached folks along the creek about purchasing strips of land through there. I'm not
Tomoko,
aware.
you guys purchased Tomoko's lot right behind
her. Again, that's not something that I am familiar with at the city, and I've been involved with city council since 2015. So I'm happy to be corrected there, and you'll be providing information that I certainly don't have. But I'd certainly welcome that if you have it, and then if that's the case, I think that'll probably prompt a bigger conversation at the city than what we've just had here. That said, I do appreciate, again, the heartfelt comments, and this is exactly why we're holding these conversations, so that we can make sure that these kinds of details and considerations are brought into the process. Amber, do we have anyone else that is with their hand raised?
Mayor Christie has her hand raised again.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
I'm also really flabbergasted that the models didn't come out with integrated green space. It is proposed as a 100% build out with no park space, no integration to saying we're going to protect the green belt and here's some more park space for you to walk along. There's no models for, yes, this outdoor restaurant space will generate zero revenue, but we're going to give it to you. What is being done to actually keep Austin, Austin? We're outdoors people, and you're trying to build big buildings behind us at the peak of the commercial real estate's going to collapse any second. Mutual fund managers are selling off their retail and office space right now. You want to build? That's responsible dollars. And it's not like we do not live in a rice field, okay? It doesn't flood here that often. It floods maybe 5 days out of a year.
Again, thank you, Christy. And this is obviously a very emotional subject for you. We're happy to continue the conversation. And again, I appreciate you taking the time. And I'm sorry this has caused you guys such stress. Amber, do we have other? Sorry, I'm getting feedback all this time. Do we have other hands raised?
No. But Gavin, did you want to say something? I muted you because you were having the feedback issue.
Very quiet in my office. So that's fine. I'll say something at the end. I don't know where we are.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Gavin.
Can you hear me now?
It's better.
Can you hear me? Not now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
That's okay. I'll
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I think I heard him say, I'll say something at the end, but he's not sure where you are in the process.
Well, we're closing. Thank you, Sean. And it may be me getting feedback all of a sudden. But I am. We'll keep the public comments open a little bit longer, just in case anyone has joined us and hasn't had a piece to say yet.
There aren't any more hands raised.
Okay.
Can we also reiterate one more time, if you're on the phone, to raise your hand, you'll push star, and then the option is 2 if you're just strictly joining by phone.
Thank you, Ashley.
Should we try Gavin again?
We'll just give it a little bit longer. I think maybe Gavin signed out and is coming back to improve the connection there.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, I'll leave my video off, see if that helps. No, I was just gonna say, listen, I'm a resident who would potentially be negatively affected, depending on, you know, what decisions are made along the Bee Caves corridor. So I mean, I just want everyone to know I start from a place that is somewhat critical, and certainly have a discerning eye when we look at, you know, these issues. But for me personally too, I want to give some perspective, and that is we're really trying, as we've done for the last several years, to check some boxes and bring some things into compliance for the city. And this particular one is us trying to come into compliance with the local government code, chapter 213. Which lays out what a comprehensive plan is, how it's to be adopted, and it's really not just about land use, but it can be. I mean, it's about land use, it's about transportation, it's about public facilities. It can be it could be one single plan, as we're talking about, or a coordinated set of plans. You know, and chapter 213 is pretty clear too, in that. That a comprehensive plan shall not consist of zoning regulations, shall not constitute zoning regulations, and it shall not establish zoning district boundaries. And so, while I do start at a critical place on some of these questions, the overall goal here is to do a better job as a city of coming up with a comprehensive set of guidelines to include, you know, a number of the other tasks that we've undertaken the last several years, whether it be an infrastructure improvement plan or a park master plan, you know, a facilities plan. There are lots of components to it that I think are important for us to keep in perspective. And so, as it's been stated several times here, this is very preliminary. This is a information gathering time. And if it takes a turn that the citizens and some of those of us who would be affected are not happy with, there's ample time to address those issues as we go forward. But we can't be too hesitant to actually start the dialogue and try to get in better compliance with our state statute. And that's really where I come from on looking at the comprehensive plan comprehensively. So anyway, those are my statements.
Thank you very much, Gavin, and good, thoughtful points as always. Amber, I've lost you on the screen, but do we have anybody else with their hand raised at this point?
Yes, Dave Bench. Dave, you can unmute yourself. He's on a computer, Ashley.
Okay. All right, there we go. Go for it, Ashley.
Yeah, Dave, so it should be in the bottom of your screen, and if you are unable to unmute yourself, there may be an issue if you're using Chrome. That's one of the biggest issues we've heard so far from a web browser. If that's the case, you can always call in or change to another browser if you have one. Still doesn't look like you're able to unmute.
Hey, Ashley, I think one thing that so it's not obvious, is that you have to get your cursor down towards the bottom in order for that unmute button to even show up. And so if your cursor is not down there, you can't see where you're supposed to hit the button to unmute.
I think that might be a setting too, because mine is there all the time, but I guess maybe some screens are set up where they're not like that.
Hello?
It looks.
Oh, we got it.
You're unmuted. Other participants, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes, okay. I can't hear you. Let me,
Okay.
There we go. Well, I just wanted to make one comment, and that is that whenever Claire and I had done this survey, it just seemed like a kind of a nice walk through the park. We were looking at all the kind of delightful options that were being considered for a variety of different things, sidewalks and maybe some additional restaurants and things like that. Yeah, why not some of that? But it seems clear to me with the results of this survey that the overwhelming need, not want, in Rollingwood is to work drainage. And it seems to me that instead of, talking about some of these, everything's important, of course, but instead of just talking about the wants or all that, maybe our focus just needs to be on how we can fix this drainage problem. Clearly, everyone, I think most people in Rollingwood recognize that it's the most serious thing that we've got, and I think the survey bears that out. And it just seems to me that we ought to just take this survey to the next thing and say, okay, what are we going to do about drainage, and how do we do that? How do we muster the funds? I don't know, maybe there's federal help, whatever, but how can we take care of this issue? That's pretty much all I got to say about it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Sorry it took me so long to get in.
No, appreciate you taking the time and appreciate your input. And in short, that's exactly what a comprehensive plan is going to help us do. We can't effectively necessarily track down federal grants or state grants or additional monies, regardless of those natures, without putting a plan together and demonstrating thoughtfully both a need and an ability to finance it, implement and finance said plan. And in truth, that's been the impetus behind just about every plan that we've put together to date, right? Whether it be the park master plan, our infrastructure improvement plan. We've got plans all the way back from 2013. And for the folks that are still listening, one of the things that this council has been endeavored to do over the last several years is to ensure that when we have hired a consultant and paid real money for that, that these reports don't end up on the shelf, which has happened for various reasons over the course of several decades, right? Not the least of which I'll point to the last time a corridor study, economic corridor study, was in 1999. It may not surprise too many people to know that the recommendations back in 1999 rather, were very similar to some of the suggestions, a number of the suggestions in 2019. And for various reasons, our community didn't undertake some of those decisions over the course of those 20 years. So we have these. We know that we have these needs. We have roughly between, depending on how you want to carve it up, somewhere between $20 and $30 million worth of deferred maintenance. That's down to our streets. That's down to our drainage. That's down to our water lines. Down to our municipal and spatial needs. The question that we have to ask ourselves as a community is how we want to prioritize these things, and how do we want to prioritize these actual needs with some of the services that got great ranks or ratings, right? These things all cost money, and a city has to understand and determine how to pay for them. And so if we make a decision to go forward with the status quo, if you will, perhaps we have to, cut into whatever police budget to fix our water lines, or perhaps we have to cut into our trash collection to pay for, whatever improved infrastructure. These are decisions that these are options, I guess, that the city has, and the question is, what decisions do we want to make? What do we want to prioritize? And that's where this information, this data comes from. And then the benefits of a comprehensive plan are such that, I guess Sarah, forgive me, but you may have been on council back in 2013. but I don't know that anybody else has. Well, maybe Amy was doing some work back in 2013. But aside from that, what we have at a city level is a loss of institutional knowledge, and that's going to happen with an all-volunteer army. So, for instance, I'll draw attention to this the water line, the CIP that was performed by our engineers. No, that was a great study. It underscored water line needs that existed back in 2013 and put a price tag of over $3 million on it. Here we are 7 years later, and we're knocking the dust off of this plan that has been benched. And in truth, I've only heard rumblings of it in the 5 years that I've been involved with the city. So these are the types of things where you lose this institutional knowledge. Maybe it falls from a front burner to a back burner. Those folks in our community that have been dealing with water pressure issues, broken water line, boil water notices, I guarantee you they haven't forgotten about it. But one of the things that we do now have is a $3 million price tag on a plan that hasn't been implemented in 7 years. And so one of the things that a comprehensive plan can help us do is provide this loose framework as this all volunteer army moves forward. There's a framework for us to continue at least some kind of comprehensive approach to how this city is being run. Because in truth, if we're doing this properly, it's not just the next 5, 10, or 20 years. This city should outlive all of us, and if we've really done it properly, our children and our grandchildren. And I think that's what we're tasked with doing, and that's why we try to undertake these plans. So again, I appreciate everyone's feedback. Dave, I think your comments were right on point, and in truth, that's exactly what we're endeavoring to work on. All of these very thoughtful plans of ours come with a price tag. And it's not just enough to say we want or need these things. We also have to turn around and understand how we're going to pay for them. Not just now, but how we're going to pay for them down the line. So appreciate that. After that diatribe, do we have any other hands raised, or are we good for today?
Jeannie Nair.
Miss Nair, welcome. Hi, Jeannie. There's a mute button down in the bottom left of your screen. Is she joining us on a computer or by phone? Do you know?
She's on a computer.
So, Ms. Nair, if you run your cursor down to the bottom of your screen,
there
you'll
she
see,
is.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Great. Yes, ma'am. Well, I thought we could hear you.
She just muted herself again.
No, if we need to change it, that mic.
Just nod your head if you can hear me, because I cannot hear you. Okay. I just want to stress that part of the planning is also identifying what is not wanted by the community and prioritizing those issues which are a very low priority for the future. And so the concerns that I've heard from people on Timberline Drive are certainly concerns that I would have as well if I lived over there. So I think that part of this planning initiative should be not only identifying what will be priorities for the future, but also what will not be priorities for the future. And that's just all I want.
I appreciate it. No, and I think that's a really fair point. In truth, I think you're right. It's not just enough to say what we need today, but also to underscore what it means for our community tomorrow. So thanks for making that point. Amber or Ashley, do we have anybody else with their hands up?
We have Brooke Brown again, Mayor.
Okay. For the sake of time, guys, I'm going to ask, especially if it's a second round of comments, that we keep them pretty tight.
The only thing I wanted to bring up is that the infrastructure improvement plan, the freeze report, also includes for every one of those drainage projects the availability of state and federal funds and grants. And so one thing that I think we ought to consider in any comprehensive plan is not just what can be done in the commercial corridor, but also what can be done through those grants and other state and federal funds that may be available. So let's not forget that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Those are and excellent points. I think this is very much the first step, this data gathering, and then once as a community we've come together and said, okay, this is a good way forward, or potentially a good way forward. The next step is how do we finance it? And I will tell you that I am a big advocate of talking to both the state and feds about assistance on intelligent projects such as drainage. So thank you very much, and I can assure you we will definitely keep an eye towards that. Do we have anybody else?
No.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to close the public comments section, and assuming there's nothing else from the dais, you guys have all been very generous with your time for very important initial conversation for the city. So thanks for that. If there's nobody else on the dais, I don't see any hands raised. I'll ask that you hold your peace into the next go round. And again, a very sincere thank you for everybody joining. Sean, Kathy, thank you very much for the thoughtful initial approach. We look forward to what you guys are churning out for this second round, given all the feedback that you've heard today. And I'm sure as you'll continue to hear as we go forward with this process.
Absolutely. Thank you.
With that, I am going to adjourn the work session, and just for the sake of clarity, and tell Erasmo thank you as well. I saw that he was just on here and ducked out. I didn't want him to feel left out. With that, I'll go ahead and ask council for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion from Sarah.
Second.
Second from Amy. Then I'll go ahead and roll call vote on that. Amy Patillo.
Aye.
Sarah Hudson.
Aye.
Wendy Hundley.
Aye.
Gavin, do we still have you?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
All right on. Again, everybody, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and look forward to a constructive bit of conversation as we move. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.